A Shalom Akim Shalbat Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Kakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquath and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and was always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to touch on the importance of gleaning, the custom of gleaning, what that meant within our culture, and how that practice is very, very important in regards to maintaining the welfare, the social welfare of our people, and essentially the how it helps those who are less fortunate. And also, another part of this lesson is really and truly to see this, the importance of this law and how this law is not being put forth in effect upon the planet Earth, right? Because what we have in this day and time is a mismanagement of funds, mismanagement of resources, because the scriptures say that the earth is giving into the hand of the wicked, right? And one of the mindsets of this earth, and the rulers thereof, the really and truly the mindset of the rulers is to essentially hog all the resources for themselves and leave the people in a state of being destitute, not having anything, right? So what I wanted to do today, I just want to touch on, I guess, two different topics. So the importance of the law itself and understanding why this law is important and how this law really is affecting the planet Earth, really, when you think about it, and the fact that this law is not being carried out. And I sincerely pray that this lesson may be edifying, right? So I'm going to go to one of my reference books here. This is in Manners and Customs of the Bible, right? So this goes into gleaning, right? So it says here, the Israelites were commanded by their law, to be merciful to the poor, the corners of the field. So this is going into the sentiments of practices for agriculture, right? So it says here, the corners of the field were not to be reaped. It says if a sheaf should be accidentally left in the field, it was to be allowed to remain there, and this grain in the corners and these odd sheaves in the field were for the poor. So essentially it's a bit of a social welfare system when you think about it, a very ancient social welfare system. So say, for example, if you have a field, and you're growing, let's just say you're growing grapes, right? You are not going to reap all the corners, the entire corners, and the entirety of your whole field. What you will do is, you have in a vineyard, for example, right? You have in that vineyard, what you will do is you will reap, what you have, right? And then you would leave a little bit, set aside for those who are essentially less fortunate, right? Maybe somebody falls a bit on hard times, and or the person probably might be, I guess you could say, like, maybe passing through or whatnot, right? Those people, you would leave a little bit of those grapes, for them, right? So that is kind of like an example of your social responsibility, essentially, because what the scriptures talk about in regards to love is really the keeping of the commandments, right? And this is one of the things that's within our laws to do, in the event, like, I know we're not living in a time where we have the big fields, and so on and so forth, and have these different resources, but just to bring into an understanding that how important this law really is for the welfare, right, of one another, right? And also it shows you the care and compassion we had to have in being considerate also. You're not just being a person who is a niggard, right? Basically like Esau, because Esau really and truly is the original niggard, right? So let me read just a little bit the rest of this here, and I want to get a couple precepts on that. So here it says the Hebrews were not directed, well, I'm sorry, were directed to not pick up their grapes closely, but to leave a few for the poor, right? So it says here, so that's pretty much it actually. So it was a bit just like a welfare system when you really, break it down, right? That's pretty much it. It's nothing too complex, too complicated, but I'm just showing you the importance of the type of mindset that the culture that the Lord gave us these laws, statutes, and commandments, and how much these things are needed upon the planet Earth, and how much even just implementing one of these laws would change the welfare of this entire world. But we know Esau's not going to do that because the soul that's within him, as the scriptures say, is not upright, right? So let's actually get the law on this. So just bear with me. Let me just look here. I kind of just wanted to give my put in the 2 cents there. Okay, so this is Leviticus chapter 19, verse 9, and it says, "And when ye reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither thou shalt gather the gleanings of thy harvest. Thou shalt not glean thy vineyard." As a matter of fact, let's get that word glean, just so we can get more of an understanding of that sentiment of what the Lord is trying to convey here. So just bear with me. Let me just find a tab real quick I can open. Let's go to the etymology. Just bear with me on this. Let me just open this up here. Glean. Okay, so glean in the etymology here, it says to gather by inquisition, to scrape together, especially grains left on in the field after harvesting. So after, it's these grapes are ready to be pricked. These bushels of wheat are ready to be collected. All this barleys are ready to be harvested. You're not going to scrape together the whole, every inch and every nook and cranny of that field. You're going to leave a little bit there, for the poor, the less fortunate, the widows, the one and so forth, right? Here it says, hold on. It says to glean, it says to make a collection, it says he collects, it says he gathers, and that's pretty much it. So essentially it's basically to scrape together, right? So let's go back to the law on this. So read verse 10 again, and it said, "Thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord Yahweh, thy power." Right? So this is a mindset, to actually have, essentially, you practice a sentiment of social responsibility by keeping the mindset of the ways of the Lord, and it also brings into consideration the welfare of those who may not have the resources as much as you do, right? So let me just go here real quick. Just a little bit more here. This is Deuteronomy 24 and 21. This is, it says, hold on, just bear with me. Okay, here's another example. Deuteronomy 24, verse 19, and it says, "When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. Leave it, it shall be for a stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. I, that the Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashim thy power may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. And just a reiteration, it says, verse 21, it says, when thou gatherest the grapes in thy field, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. Right? So it's essentially to also keep in mind those who may not have the resources that you have. Right? You know, and yes, we're not in a time where we have these kinds of resources, but you can understand why, this is also two things you can actually extrapolate from this. One thing you can take from this, okay, this is the way the Lord intended us to actually conduct ourselves when we had resources, when we were going into the land, and during the time of Joshua, the different tribes received their different portions, of the land, right? So it serves also as a reminder to our people that, you were also in a position where you were destitute. When we were in Egypt serving hardcore slavery, you know what I'm saying? It was also a reminder to those, when we were in a position when we didn't have the resources, like when we went into the land, right? When we were in the wilderness, and it's just essentially it serves as a good reminder when you're abounding, right? And Paul talks about this was when you're a base and when you're abound. It serves as a good reminder to when you're abounding, to keep in mind those who may not have as much as you, right? It kind of serves also as a sentiment of alms if you think about it as well, right? Because charity does cover a multitude of sins, right? As the scriptures say, right? So now, what I also wanted to touch on is the importance of not necessarily the importance per se, but also what happens in this rulership that makes it detrimental that these laws are not being practiced. So let me go to the Apocrypha real quick. Bear with me on this. Okay, so this is Sirach chapter 10, verse 1, and it says, a wise judge, will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered, as a judge of the people is himself, and so are his officers. What manner of the man the ruler of the city is, such are all that they that dwell therein. Verse 3 is the point, an unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. Right? So Esau is the type of person that destroys his people because he doesn't actually maintain this mindset. He doesn't actually care about the welfare of the people. All right? When you see, what's going on today, like, for example, a lot of these cities are now experiencing a lot of homelessness. You have essentially people that are coming into the countries, these Western nations, well, these more developed nations, Canada, U.S., different European nations. They're coming in and they're essentially what the refugees are being looked after a lot more than their own citizens, and Esau is showing more and more time again that their own people are not being looked after, right? Esau is essentially somebody like a point I was saying earlier. He's a niggard, and a niggard is somebody who essentially hoards all the resources to himself, right? That law is very, very important because it was a mindset to teach our people and remind our people, hey, you were also in a destitute situation, right? But Esau is the type of person that hoards all the resources for himself. And he is not the type of person to have an understanding of what to do with it. So he hoards it for himself, and then you leave your people to essentially protest. You know, they're complaining about benefits, which is all crumbs anyway. But the point really is, how much more of a dramatic effect would the earth change if you actually implement the ways of the Heavenly Father, right? This is Sirach chapter 14, verse 3. And it says, riches are not comely for a niggard. And what should an envious man do with money? I want to get this in the hold on. This is I'm gonna jump down to verse 10 here, and it says, a wicked eye envieth his bread. He is a niggard at his table, so he's somebody who's very stingy. You know, a good example of that is when those California fires were occurring a couple months ago. You know, you had this one-ish family. I forgot what their names were, but essentially they were hoarding a lot of the water to themselves. When look at the condition of your city and you hoarding all the water to yourself, and the when and that's something that's needed in an emergency. But you see how, oh, hold on. Another precept just came into my mind. 1 second. But this is the mindset of Esau. You know, he doesn't have the understanding of how to actually properly manage the funds, the natural resources upon the planet Earth. Okay, let me go to. This is Sirach chapter 20, verse 30, and it says, wisdom that is hid and treasure that is hoarded up, what profit is in them both? Esau is not the type of person to actually have a mindset to care about, you know, the welfare of the people. He doesn't have the mindset to actually, you know, care about his own people, care about you Israelites. And you Israelites need to wake up and understand that, because you're dealing with somebody who's not upright, right? You're dealing with somebody who just is greedy. He just wants everything for himself. He and really and truly is the original niggard, not you Israelites, right? You Israelites need to stop calling yourself these names, right? You know, he is somebody that's naturally stingy. And I was reflecting on a conversation between I was having with one of my elders, and naturally, when you think about it, when and I've heard this also about the northern tribes when they first encountered Columbus, how they were very, very more willing to share the resources that they had when they first encountered them. Jake, in their natural estate, their mindset is more to actually share and actually utilize the resources in righteousness. You know, and that's something that is commonly that we do in the Caribbean actually. But being amongst Esau, who is an original and a natural niggard, you Israelites have become more like niggards, right? Esau is really the original niggard because he doesn't have anything of himself, right? This is this is Obadiah. Hold on. 1 verse 2, and I'll actually I'll start at verse 1 and I'll jump down to 5, and it says, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord concerning Edom, we have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador that is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And right, and Esau is very, very despised because for this very same reason that he's a niggard. So he will do this on not just a national scale, but you also do this in a corporative scale also. So, for example, I'll use Shell as an example when it comes to companies. So, what he'll do is they'll go into different countries, set up shop, um, try and extract all the resources of that land, right? Contaminate the land. And that's exactly what Shell did when they went into Nigeria. And then to the point where the locals, the Israelites who were there, they couldn't actually utilize the resources, the natural resources of that land anymore because it was so heavily polluted and heavily contaminated, right? To the point where these companies, through Esau running these different companies, will go into different countries and essentially contaminate and leave a sour taste in the mouth of these different Israelites, where they're situated. I'm just using Shell, the gas company Shell, as an example, right? But this is multiple different examples of why Esau is despised, right? Going back into the title of the lesson, he doesn't share the resources, right? He hoards it for himself. He doesn't care about the welfare of the people, and if it affects his bottom line, he gets rid of those people. And there's been many countless times where you've had companies like that I think another company was I think the country was Guatemala, if I'm not mistaken, or Nicaragua, and the company was called United Fruit Company. And then eventually there was a president. His name was Jacob Arbenz, if I'm not mistaken. But long story short, it got so bad to the point where the CIA had to get involved, and they had to they tried to use propaganda to get rid of him because he wanted the resources. They wanted the land. The Israelites, they wanted the land for themselves, for his people. You know what I'm saying? But him to do that, it affected his bottom line. So they tried to essentially get rid of him. Let me jump down to verse 5, and it says, "If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes?" Right? And that's not the type of person Esau is. He's not the type of person to actually leave some grapes for himself. He's the soul that's like I said this again. The soul that's within these people is not upright. They don't have a mindset to share and care about the welfare of you people, care about the welfare of you Israelites, care about the welfare of the planet, right? He's backwards. So, okay, let me go here. Okay, this is Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. And it says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." And that's exactly what's going on in the world right now. People are mourning because you have niggards who are ruling and mismanaging the resources on the planet. They're hoarding it all for themselves, right? And you people have nothing, especially Israelites. So that's pretty much the lesson. But that's pretty much just a recap. Just wanted to touch on the importance of that ancient social welfare system, right? But if you really, I guess I'll end off with this last precept, right? Because when you really think about it, even though we don't have these things, we can still practice these things, to a certain extent, right? Let me just get this, practice this law, to a certain extent, right? Because we don't have farmlands, we don't have animals, we don't have these type of, resources, right? But this is Tobit 4:8. And it says, "If thou hast abundance, give alms accordingly. But if thou have but a little, be not afraid to give according to that little," right? So, being in that mind frame, you have some, you have a little bit of resources to help out, brethren, you can still kind of, in a roundabout way, kind of implement that law, so to speak, right? Yes, we're not saved by keeping the whole law, but it's just the mentality and the mind frame, right? You don't want to be like what's this guy's name, Nabal, for example. He was a niggard. He had the resources and the riches to be able to help, even that was his own kin, right? And he didn't want to help out, King David and his men. So anyways, that's pretty much the point. I hope this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.